Go for it, Jordan.
Um, you always challenge us to look not at what the guru is saying, but what they're doing.
Mhm.
And one thing that has always stood out to me about you, not that I would call you a guru, because that's not a kind term most of the time, but one thing I've noticed is that like all of your programs are, in my mind, extremely cheap compared to like what most people in the market are charging for the amount of support that you're giving.
Yes.
Is that different because it's a one to many as opposed to one-on-one program, or like
So good question. It's one of the first things I explained in the seven-figure training company. I made an executive decision of how to AMOS my service. Okay. And how can I, instead of pricing my service, like with an online course or mentoring or something like that, it's a different model than face-to-face therapy. It has to be expensive because it just works like that. But with an online course, you've got the choice of doing it cheap, really expensive, depending on who you are. And it was an executive decision long-term. So in the short term, it doesn't work that well. Long-term, it always wins because your courses are cheaper. But basically what I've done, that's the way I differentiated. But I've differentiated on price to make it I've made it as cheap as the battery will allow me. Okay, to use Elon's example. But I've also added more support than any other program, so I win either way. So my thinking is, how can I make the cheapest program possibly that fits my economics, that my company can still exist, but have more support, more value, and better teaching than a $10,000 or a $20,000 or a $50,000 mastermind. And I've been on one of those masterminds and it was terrible. So either way, I'll win. Does that make sense? It's a long-term thinking strategy. The same. Jeff Bezos does that with eBay as well. That's where I took that from. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah. So if you price your company or your service based on just money, you limit the market, because I also know, as we just found out, therapists and coaches are spending $25,000, $30,000, $50,000 on their certifications. So what's the point of me doing that? I know the state of the market, so I've got to give them something that works for them, that I can still survive as well. And long-term, knowing I'll win that value game. Does that help?
It does. It does. And I'm very tempted to want to think of it the same way, with the cheapest way that I can build a battery, even for one-on-one. Yes. Is that a dangerous mindset to get into?
I think it's the only mindset that works. I actually have a slide it's the second video of that program. It's a slide that Elon came up with. I'll see if I can bring it up on my phone. I'll read it to you, because this was my thinking. Just bear with me for a sec. Elon Musk. I've got the slide in there, but I don't have the thing in front of me. Which one did I use? There we go. So here's Elon's master plan. Okay. Build a sports car, use that money to build an affordable sports car, use that money to build an even more affordable sports car. While doing the above, also provide zero emission electric power with generation options. Now, what did I take from that? Build a course that was expensive enough to support myself. And then with that money, keep refining the course, giving it more value, having it help more things and do more things, like the environment. For Elon, for us, it's helping the industry, to make it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, to the point where it's not that I'm breaking even, but long-term, my value overrides the money that I earn or the money that I'm charging. That's what that's about. So for a company, you can get out there and compete with the $25,000, $30,000 courses, but it's also those people, the first ones to fail, because they get too greedy. So I always think if value becomes the equation, make it as cheap as possible. When I say cheap, that's the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying. Do that, and then long-term you win. It's a long-term game. You'll see a lot of gurus come out, they make all this money, all this flash, all this hype. 2 years later, they're gone. They've collected all the money, and then those people can't find that person. When all the hype dies down, there's a lot of angry people. I'm not interested in the hype. I'm interested in long-term.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Does that help?
It does. Can I ask one more question?
Of course.